Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. The cope of Trinitarians in regards to Jesus being all-knowing. Let's watch a short clip to begin with.
Hey Jay, I got a quick question for you.
What's up?
The theandric union, obviously the person of Christ, is a divine person. It had a divine nature from all eternity, assumed human nature in his incarnation. When Jesus said nobody knows the hour, the day, or the time except for the Father, was he speaking from the inherent limitations within his human nature, or was he speaking allegorically?
Right, I agree with St. Basil, who covers this in a couple letters. I think it's letter 235-ish, somewhere in there. If it's not, I'll post the exact sections of where he covers it. And it's like exaggerated phraseology, like when he says, "There's no one good but God," or "Why do you call me good teacher?" Right. Well, in other places he says he is a good teacher. Right. You are correct to call me teacher. Right. So it's kind of like nobody knows this or nobody can do this. It's not in a literal exclusionary sense, because in other places Jesus does speak of having omniscience, and the scriptures tell us that he does have knowledge of all history and all facts. So does that make sense? And that's the kind of the line. That's the line of reasoning that Basil has.
As one can see, unsurprisingly, the heresy of Trinitarianism has tangled the Trinitarian in a web of uncertainty, yet again. The caller seeks to get a clarification from J. Dyer on the issue of Jesus being omniscient as a human. Understandably so, for good reasons, because anyone who reasons cannot agree with such an absurdity, which to the mind is an act of intellectual treason. To begin with, it is important to understand that as much as the Trinitarian apologists tried to play down the significance of this passage, we can instead summarize it in the words of Ralph Martin, who holds a doctorate in theology from the Angelicum University in Rome and was appointed by Pope Benedict XVI as a consultor to the Pontifical Council for the New Evangelization. Ralph Martin states in his book, Mark, Evangelist and Theologian, page 124, the following. The admission attributed to Jesus in Mark 13:32 that about that day or that hour no one except the Father knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, has been exegetical embarrassment from the beginning. Its trustworthiness as part of Jesus' teaching has been impeached partly on the ground that it seems to betray the very truth which an orthodox Christology champions. It's not a surprise. Any real lack of knowledge on the part of the Son, in any sense, was so abhorrent to the theology developing Christian writers that a number of means were employed to either dismiss the idea of the Son's ignorance altogether or reinterpret it in a completely metaphorical or symbolic way. Others used the verse to dismiss any idea of true deity in the Jesus of history. We will return to the issue of interpretation by the church writers later in this video. Back to the Dyerite dilemma, let's briefly break down the response of J, which he bases on the understanding of Basil, who argues, number 1, that Jesus was exaggerating when he said he didn't know the hour. Number 2, J tries to back that up by citing the statement of Jesus where he apparently denies he is good or a good teacher. Number 3, and he further cites the famous words of Jesus where he said that no one is good except God alone. And number 4, he argues that there are other so-called clear-cut passages where Jesus makes it clear he is all-knowing. Let's go over the controversy of Jesus' clear-cut denial of knowing the hour. As for the first point by J, we respond that it is an absurd thing to say that Jesus was exaggerating when he said he doesn't know the hour. From the apparent, it is clear he is ascribing the knowledge of the hour to God alone, and thereby glorifying his Lord, the only true one who is God alone. The true believers of Jesus, namely the Muslims, we say, and thereby correct people like J and tell them that the Messiah was not exaggerating, but making it clear that in the absolute reality, he is nothing but a servant of God. For it is not exaggeration when a man ascribes the exclusiveness of the knowledge of the hour to someone he worships as the only true God. With the second point, yet again, the Trinitarian has belittled Jesus by using a statement of humility and turned it into a statement of exaggeration. The Trinitarians have in reality denied the only true nature of Jesus, his humanity, when they neglect his clear words. For does the Messiah not say that the teachings are not from him, but from the one who sent him? And does he not say that the commandments are from he who sent him? Does the Messiah not say, Anyone who chooses to do the will of God will know that the teachings are not from my own authority, but from God's. The true teacher in reality is indeed the one whom Jesus worshipped as the only true God, but by the virtue of being an apostle of the one true God, the glorious Allah, Christ then is a teacher too, in the way that a messenger conveys the message, but the message is not from the messenger, but he who commissioned the messenger. As for the third point, the belittling of Jesus by the tongue of the Trinitarian continues. This is connected to the previous point we already clarified. When Jesus says God alone is good, this is a statement of the truth of absolute reality. For the man asks the Messiah a question by calling him good teacher. Here yet again we find in the response of Jesus a statement of humility. For as James said too, every good and perfect gift and blessing come down from above, the one and only true God the Father of the heavenly lights. Are there not the teachings that the Messiah said, not from himself, nor from his own authority, but the words of him who sent him, the only true God? Then truly God is the ultimate source of all good in reality, including the teachings that Jesus taught, but by the virtue of being an apostle of the one true God, who is the glorious Allah, Christ then is a good teacher too, like the prophets and righteous men upon correct doctrines. Inasmuch he, like the prophets, becomes a reflection of the goodness of God, but not the source of the goodness himself. As for the fourth and the final point, Jay argues that other passages teach Jesus is all-knowing. In response, we have already addressed those passages in another video before. Make sure to check it out, which can be found linked in the description below. Now, unlike many Christian apologists you may usually encounter, Jay doesn't seem to agree with them on the so-called idea that Jesus was talking in the context of a Jewish tradition, where the father of the bridegroom declares the hour of when the son would receive the brides. In essence, the Trinitarians cannot agree on the interpretation of one of the most significant passages for them. I mean, who can blame them? It's natural to cope with the clear words of Jesus if one ascribes to the heresy of Trinitarianism. There is no good reason to accept that so-called Jewish custom interpretation, but several good reasons to object are no evidence of such tradition, as the Trinitarians explain, existing at the time of Jesus or prior to him. No prominent church father and theologian interpret it that way, especially the earliest ones. The fact that Jesus mentions angels makes it clear that he is declaring the fact that neither the lower or the heavenly beings have knowledge of the hour. We may add that the specific mention of the angels makes it clear it has nothing to do with the Jewish tradition related to a wedding, rather a spiritual truth being established, i.e., the declaration of God's exclusivity of the knowledge of the hour. For what is the point of mentioning angels, or does the bridegroom say to the brides, I don't know, nor the angels, but my biological father? The absurdity is evident. Everything we have gone through so far demonstrates the level of desperation from the Trinitarians and those who affirm Christ is God. But this should not surprise any truth seeker. Just like the modern-day apologists, their fathers of theology in the past have suffered from the clear words of Jesus too, who in turn resorted to the ridiculous. For example, one of the most influential writers who celebrated with the title Doctor of the Church, namely Ambrose of Milan, argued that the phrase neither the Son was an Arian interpolation. He says, quote, "It is written, they say, but of that day and the hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father only." First of all, the ancient Greek manuscripts do not contain the words neither the Son. But it's not to be wondered if those who have corrupted the sacred scriptures have also falsified this passage. The reason for which it seems to have been inserted is perfectly plain, so long as it is applied to unfold such blasphemy. End quote. Interestingly, one of the most prominent church theologians agrees with the possibility of corruption taking place. In fact, the Injil, or Gospel, oral teachings of Jesus, has suffered from corruption, according to him, when the Arians allegedly fabricated. As a side note, no reference is made to which Greek manuscripts Ambrose is referring to. It gets worse. Ambrose thinks that the allegedly forged passage is not only plain because it presents Christ from the apparent as not being omniscient, but he thinks it's blasphemous, hence he accuses Arians. His initial thoughts were not that it's a genuine passage that could be reconciled. The modern-day apologists are deluding themselves when they argue it is no controversy in light of their own theology, when one of their doctors of the church had a headache over it. Of course, Ambrose was aware that his fellow Trinitarian theologians defended this passage. This is why he eventually decided to defend in the hypothetical scenario that if the statement was truly uttered by Jesus, it can be reconciled by appealing to the other passages which allegedly teach Jesus is omniscient. And we have previously addressed those verses, remember to check the description. Of course, Ambrose did not realize that in a state of desperation and panic, he contradicted himself, as he first asserts the passage is blasphemous, yet an alleged blasphemous statement of Jesus can be reconciled. Essentially, he decides to resort to the empty words of the pagan philosophers to cope with the clear words of Jesus, with his own presupposed truth about what and who God is. In overall estimation, it can be said that this passage will always be a headache for the mainstream Trinitarians, as it was, is, and will be for their theologians, who cope around like Jay did in the clip at the beginning of the video. The cycle is usually the same. The panic situation to find a sound interpretation. To their disappointment, they end up craving a new interpretation each time they try to explain the passage, often contradicting their own theologians and then resorting to the ridiculous, which we also have responded to after the clip. Those who are seeking the truth should ask themselves, does their loyalty belong to God and his beloved Messiah, or to those so-called theologians who claim a physical succession to the disciples of Jesus but spiritually are the furthest away? وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.